sparks in the light. Love feels close, but slips out of sight. When crown meets brown, will they let her rise or break her wings?
Where crown meets brown. In a land far from home, where the winds whispered in a language she once did not know, sat a woman of grace, stripped of everything that once defined her. Olola Janet Amy sat alone behind the house, where the walls were high and the world felt far away. She wore a simple cream cloth, expensive in fabric, yet painfully plain. No embroidery, no jewels, no sign of the life she once lived, because her heart no longer desired to shine. Her body was in Korea, but her soul still wandered the sunlit shores of home. A single tear fell from her eye as memories of her past quietly returned. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the edge of her garment. Another tear fell, then another. Her mind drifted far, far beyond Joseon, back to Nigeria, back to warmth, laughter, color, and love. But Janet chose love, and love cost her everything. She was disowned, cast out, forgotten, yet she never looked back. She married him in secret and crossed oceans to follow him. Now, years later, she sat in silence, in a land that was not hers, with memories that refused to fade. "I miss home," she whispered. Inside the estate, life moved differently. Amy sat quietly, overwhelmed by nostalgia. Though she now lived in Korea as Park Yotae's other wife and the mother of their children, her heart still longed for Nigeria, the land of her birth, the love of her father, and the life she had left behind. Her thoughts carried both beauty and pain, as she remembered who she once was, and what she had sacrificed to become who she is now. From their union, Janet and Park Yotae had 2 daughters. Their first daughter, Park Hae-ju, adapted easily to the environment when they relocated to Korea at the age of 7, embracing the culture and expectations around her. Their second daughter, Park Yu-ri, however, carried something deeper, an internal conflict shaped by her dual heritage. Park Yu-ri grew up feeling different. While her sister seemed to fit seamlessly into the world they lived in, 12 years old, Yu-ri questioned her place in it. She sensed subtle exclusion, unspoken judgments, and a quiet distance that made her feel like she did not fully belong. She was aware of her differences, and those differences became a source of internal struggle rather than pride. Her mother, Amy, carried a silence that Yu-ri could not easily understand. There were moments where Yu-ri felt a connection to something deeper within her mother, something unspoken, something hidden behind her quiet demeanor. But whenever she tried to reach for answers, Amy would withdraw into silence, as though protecting a past she was not ready to relive. This silence weighed heavily on Yu-ri. She grew increasingly curious about her origins, her identity, and the story her mother refused to tell. Her questions were not just about curiosity, they were about understanding herself. She began to realize that her identity was incomplete without knowing where she truly came from. Days later, Park Hae-ju, at the age of 14, sat gracefully, her fingers dancing across the strings of the gayagum. Her posture was perfect, her expression calm, everything a noble lady should be. Outside the window, Park Yu-ri was nearly asleep. Her chin rested lazily on her hand, her eyes half closed in boredom. Moments ago, she had been sneaking around the training grounds, watching soldiers clash swords with excitement in her eyes. Now this? Music lessons? She sighed dramatically. Hae-ju noticed and almost laughed. "Focus!" the teacher snapped. Yu-ri rolled her eyes. When the lesson finally ended, Hae-ju gave a subtle signal, a small gesture toward the kitchen door. Yu-ri's eyes lit up instantly. Within minutes, they were dressed and ready. Haeju in elegance, Yu-ri in mischief. "Where are you going?" they were asked. Yu-ri stepped forward confidently. "My sweets are finishing. I must buy more." A lie. A very obvious lie, but one told with such confidence, it passed. And soon, they were on their way. The bookstore smelled of ink and old paper. Yu-ri came alive instantly. She jumped from shelf to shelf, laughing, flipping through strange books filled with creatures and horror tales. Haeju, on the other hand, browsed quietly. Books on etiquette, sewing, discipline. Two sisters, two worlds. Behind a curtain, a teenage boy watched. He had been reading in silence, until she entered. At first he was annoyed. Then, something else. How could she laugh like that? Embarrassment. So freely. So loudly. It irritated him. He couldn't ignore it. Within moments, the shop owner stormed toward her. "Be quiet or leave!" Then, under his breath, "Half-breed." Time froze. Yu-ri's laughter died instantly. Her eyes darkened. Before anyone could react, she charged forward, but arms wrapped tightly around her. "Haeju, let me go! Let me go! That ugly ajushi!" Her voice was muffled. Her anger burned. Storm was rising. She hated that word, not because it defined her, but because people used it like a weapon. Meanwhile, Yu-ri and Haeju made their way home. Though the streets were calm, Yu-ri's steps were tense, her silence heavy with lingering anger from everything that had happened. Haeju glanced at her a few times, but chose not to speak, sensing her sister needed the quiet. As they entered the compound, they were met with an unexpected sight. Their father was escorting the left state councilor out of the house. The atmosphere around the man was imposing, his presence alone enough to command respect. The girls stopped. Haeju immediately stepped forward, bowing properly with grace and composure. "I hope you are in good health, counselor," she said politely, her voice soft and respectful. Yu-ri, however, only gave a slight bow and nod off her head before continuing past them without a word. The difference was unmistakable. The left state chancellor watched her briefly before turning to their father with a faint smile. "Your eldest daughter is very respectful," he said. "She seems kind and well-raised." His tone shifted ever so slightly. "Unlike your youngest, she appears to be quite the opposite." Their father let out a light laugh, though it carried a hint of strain. "Children will always be children," he replied smoothly. "They grow in their own ways." The counselor nodded, satisfied enough, before stepping into his palanquin and departing. As soon as he was gone, the air seemed to change. Their father turned and walked back inside. Not long after, a servant came to summon Yu-ri. She entered his study quietly, standing before him. His expression was stern, his disappointment clear. "You need to be more ladylike," he began, his voice firm. "Gentle, composed. Look at your sister, learn from her. Even if you are different, there are expectations you must meet." Yu-ri's jaw tightened slightly, but she held his gaze. There was a flicker of defiance in her eyes, though she tried to keep her voice controlled. "I am not Haeju," she said quietly. The room fell still for a moment. Their father sighed, rubbing his temple briefly as if tired of the constant tension. "That is exactly the problem," he replied. "You refuse to even try." Yu-ri opened her mouth as if to say more, but stopped herself. Whatever words she held back settled heavily in her chest. After a brief silence, he dismissed her. That night, she didn't sleep. Her mind replayed everything: the insult, the boy watching, the feeling of being judged. "Who was he?" she muttered. And then, a smile. Revenge. Days later, whispers spread through the market. The bookstore was infested. Rats. Cockroaches. Customers stopped coming. Justice, in her own way. She had spread the rumor through her maids and the local kids, but fate was already moving beyond childish revenge. Back at the Park residence, life continued, but beneath the surface, tension quietly brewed. Their father, grandmother, stepmother, their younger brother, and lastly their mother, all sat at the table, eating. Breakfast was silent, as always, except for the stepmother. Complaints, criticism, endless dissatisfaction. "The soup is too spicy again." Yuri and Heiju exchanged a glance, silent smile, because they both knew that soup would never change. It was their mother's favorite, and in this house, that mattered more than complaints. It's one of the things their father preserved for their mother. Their grandmother cleared her throat gently, drawing everyone's attention at the dining table. With a calm but firm voice, she informed them that their granduncle, Park Han-jo, her late husband's younger brother, would soon be arriving in Hanyang from their ancestral village in Andong. The announcement carried weight, and her gaze lingered on each of them, especially the children. She reminded them to be on their best behavior, her tone leaving no room for carelessness. Their father, who had already been aware of the visit, nodded in agreement. Turning to his wife, Shin Tae-ra, he instructed her to begin preparations immediately, ensuring everything was in order for their distinguished guests. Then, with a brief but meaningful glance, he addressed the girl's mother, reminding her to dress more extravagantly. Without waiting for a response, he rose from the table, his movements deliberate and composed. He had duties to attend to at the palace, and afterwards he planned to visit his business stores. Park was no ordinary merchant. He was a man of immense wealth and influence, dealing in rare fabrics and finely crafted ceramic pots and vases that only the elite could afford. His family's wealth spanned generations, but he had not merely inherited it, he had expanded it, multiplying their fortune through skill and discipline. In their village and beyond, the Park name commanded respect. As soon as he left, the atmosphere at the table shifted. Shin Tae-ra began to complain under her breath while feeding her young son Park Bu-ran, her voice laced with irritation. The boy, however, seemed more interested in the chicken soup she refused to give him. He protested quietly, his small face scrunching in frustration. Though the spices were strong, he liked it enough to endure them. Ignoring his pleas, she continued feeding him something else, eventually rising and leaving the table with him in a huff. Silence lingered briefly before softening into warmth. Left behind were the two girls, their mother, and their grandmother. The tension dissolved into gentle conversation, small laughter, and shared smiles that felt rare but comforting. At the palace, however, the mood was far more serious. The king sat in quiet authority as he spoke with Park. His voice was steady but carried an underlying urgency. He asked again whether Park had reconsidered the position he had previously offered him, reminding him that such an opportunity would not remain open forever. The king explained that his generosity stemmed from loyalty to Park's late father, who had served as the chief head of the military and investigatory bureau during his time on the council. A shadow crossed the king's expression as he recalled the past. He spoke of the war with the Ming dynasty, of how Park's father had died during that turbulent time when he himself was still crown prince. His sacrifice, he said, could never be forgotten. It was out of honor and gratitude that he had allowed Park the freedom to travel the world and live as he pleased. But now, the time had come for him to decide his position in court. Park lowered his head respectfully, his voice calm yet unwavering as he expressed his gratitude.